I didn't see any cracks in the facade. I'd fully bought the lie, and I needed the hope really bad. I just had no idea that it was false hope.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for The Forum, author and speaker. Prisha Mosley once thought she wanted to be a male, and she soon discovered that many adults in her life were only too willing to help her transition into one. But in time, she realized it was all wrong, and in trying to reverse course, Prisha woke up to the deception she'd been fed. Currently, Prisha is in the spotlight, fighting hard to enlighten our culture and world on the debacle that so many have fallen to of believing that sex is interchangeable, that if we feel like we've been born into the wrong body, a disorder labeled in psychological terms as body dysmorphia, that this can be accomplished. Like many, however, Prisha discovered in an agonizing way that this is not only impossible, but that the movement to convince people otherwise is a grave and irreversible injustice. Why does she think so? Because she's lived it. I heard Prisha speak on YouTube a few years back about her experience trying to reclaim her femaleness and the suffering that entailed. I mentioned her story in a conversation a year ago with Dr. Patrick Lovejoy, a Lutheran pastor who's been working to educate people on the myths of the transgender movement as seen through the Christian worldview. As a victim of this movement, Prisha has conviction behind her words, since she has not just observed, but experienced the result of this experiment gone wrong that America has been all too eager to participate in. Prisha stands as a powerful witness to share the truth about the trans movement that has overtaken so many minds, and will not stop until her voice, which represents many others, is heard and understood. In this month of June, designated by some as a month to celebrate civilization's so-called advancements in sexual liberation, Prisha's testimony is needed, and I'm grateful to have her with us today. One quick disclaimer, I consider this interview PG-13 for some of the content that goes into depth about her medical journey, addressing some physical components that might be sensitive for younger souls. So please consider, if you have young ears nearby, listening to it privately. With that said now, let's welcome this brave mother and soldier in the fight for life and truth. Welcome, Prisha, to Matters of Soul Importance. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I'm grateful for another opportunity to share my story. So thank you for having me.
Well, I am so grateful to have you. You came to my attention about a year ago, or maybe two now that I think about it. I think it was in June 2024 that the video that I saw telling your story just really was so heart-wrenching and powerful. And Prisha, I know that I'm sure this is exhausting. I know you've been in legal battles for this topic, but the topic is, why couldn't I, a biological woman, be a man? That's the question we're going to have you answer in long form today. But before we get into the pressing aspect of your story, which is so heart-wrenching, like I said before, but so hopeful at the end of it, Prisha, could you share a little bit about, let's go back into your childhood and kind of set us up for what we're going to hear later. What kind of childhood did you have? And I know there was some trauma in there that led down this path. So go ahead and just start sharing that.
So yeah, I had a difficult growing up. There was some turmoil in my family that led for it to be more difficult for me to have other traumas and mental struggles I was having to be addressed properly. But when I was 14, I experienced a sexual assault, which ultimately led to pregnancy and miscarriage, which was incredibly devastating to me. And this took place shortly after I had my first period, which I associated the act, the trauma, with my womanhood, the same way I associated my period with it, because that was the messaging I was getting. And that was really difficult for me, and led me to not like myself and not feel safe as a girl or a woman. And I developed an eating disorder around this age and stopped having my period because because I wasn't eating and I didn't want it anymore. And I spent a lot of time online, particularly on tumblr.com, in eating disorder forums and similar. And this is where I ended up being exposed to trans ideology.
Hmm. Wow. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry you went through that. I'm thinking about my own. 14 was around the time I got my period, and I was not like eager to be a woman. I just was. I liked childhood, to be honest. So,
Yeah.
it was. So, I think for anyone, any woman, any girl, it's kind of a traumatic moment. I mean, I remember one of the things was I realized I could get pregnant, and it just was like, oh wow, not that I was in a relationship at the time, but I knew that was possible, and that was a scary prospect. So what happened after that then? So you were trying to recover from that. You got into this group, and lead us into kind of how you were, I guess, wooed into that mind space and what attracted you to it.
Yeah. So I was, like I said already, in eating disorder forums and spaces online, where myself and other girls and women from about age 13 or 14 to age 20 or 25, we were all talking to each other and sharing in eating disorder behaviors and tips and tricks and stuff like that, and just sharing in our misery. I lamented about what happened to me and about how I thought I was fat and things like that. And I was met with, similar to what is offered by the trans community, was affirmation. I was told that I wasn't crazy, but that my feelings made sense. And then when trans identified adults who were, I view now as trans activists, came into our group, they told us that the reason we were miserable was because we were trans. We weren't in fat bodies. We were born in entirely the wrong body. And that was the reason for our misery and suffering. And I kept hitting my ultimate goal weights over and over, and not finding peace or happiness. So I bought into this idea. And again, instead of being told that I was crazy or that I needed real help or to look into my feelings and why I felt that way and have root traumas addressed, I was just affirmed. I was told that I was born in the wrong body and that aligning my brain and my body would fix my suffering. And when I brought this to my doctors, my nutritionist, and eventually an pediatric endocrinologist, the trans delusion was also met with affirmation. And this was completely different than how my anorexia was being treated. Because on one hand, they were treating me like I was delusional and I didn't know what my body looked like or how to take care of it. And on the other hand, they trusted me and took it seriously when I said I was actually a man, when by all merits and biology, I am female.
Well, and my next question was going to be, aside from Tumblr, were you getting any outside, interactions, any support? I can't imagine, because I know that's a comparison that's used often, and I think aptly, of an eating disorder versus the trans aspect, because both are similar in that there's body dysmorphia, right? And so to be told no in one and that you have to correct it, and the other way, no, we can change that. We can actually adjust to this, and we can do things to continue it. Was there anything internally that you recall going on that I mean, I know in hindsight you've had a lot of clarity. Obviously, that's how it works. But like at the time, was that confusing? Do you remember being confused by that mixed message even then?
No, because my doctors convinced me that I had like a disease. Like there was something wrong with, I had a mismatch between my brain and my body. I understood that my anorexia was a mental illness and that it affected my brain, but I was ultimately deceived into believing that I had an intersex condition. But instead of having like a penis and breasts or something and my body being mismatched, they told me that the mismatch was between my brain and my body. And this was why I was so miserable, because my brain was involved, and that the only treatment for this was to change my body to match my brain.
Okay, so how did you then move forward? And I guess you trusted them at that point. They were the experts, they were the doctors. Were there any other influences that were sort of coming in and saying, no, this isn't right? Or how did that all work that you were able to be swayed to such a degree?
I mean, my parents didn't think it was right for me, especially my mom, but I really didn't trust them because of the struggles they had going on. I don't want to talk about their personal lives too much, but there was alcoholism growing up, and that proved to me that my parents' judgment wasn't very meaningful. So I didn't believe them when they told me that I was a girl and I wasn't born in the wrong body and that this wasn't true. I just thought it was more lies or insanity from them. So it meant nothing to me. And otherwise, I was pretty isolated and just spent my time online and then seeing my therapist and doctors.
And so I come from an alcoholic, addictive home, dysfunction as well. And
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. Like, it's so common. And also paired with that, though, it's just a natural time to break apart from your parents, right? There is a natural, my dad used to call it, there's a natural rebellion. It's a part of childhood that you are going off on your own and you're starting to look to other sources to help mold you. So you were in that place. So it was kind of a perfect storm. Not only that, Prisha, as you know, it was going on in our culture. I remember on Twitter seeing like this massive amount, like a crazy spike in transitions in the UK. And it was like a 4,000 increase or something crazy. And I'm like, that's coming here. And it did. Like a couple years later, we caught up. And unfortunately, you were right there in the crosshairs. I don't know. Yeah.
I agree. I was in the first cohort of people to transition when it started becoming popular. I actually started my transition before gay marriage was legal, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, yeah. So all of that stuff was all the sexual revolution, all that stuff was coming into the fray and being discussed and here's this new possibility. You know, one of the things as I was processing all this as it was unfolding is, well, it's now one of the reasons it's you know, what is the reason for that spike? One of the reasons is that now it's possible. Now there's, you know, medical technology that are allowing for these kinds of things. I know there were some before that, but it was becoming more fine-tuned, more specific. And so it was simply possible. But the other thing is, I realized as it was going speedily ahead without a lot of questioning, that there was also money to be made from it. I don't know if that's been a part of your fight, but we can get into that later. But all these motivating factors for adults who should know better. I mean, you were a child. You know, we have a responsibility as a society, as a world, to care for our children whose brains aren't even developed yet. So that's where you were at. Take us through the transition as much as you want to share about what you went through. And let's go there now.
So I was seeing this nutritionist, and my eating plan had caused me to start my period again, which I found very distressing. And this is when I took the opportunity to bring up the trans identity. I was struggling with cutting myself really bad, and I had a big episode of ripping out my sutures and stuff like that. It was really bad. And in all of this discussion, the pediatric endocrinologist met with me in the nutritionist office. This started behind my parents' back, and I was told that they couldn't do anything if they found out I was trans, and this was the treatment I needed. So I was eventually referred to a woman who would write the letter of recommendation for me. And my parents did take me to that appointment. I had told them at this point and was trying to get them on board and just have like a good, happy family. Because on top of it, instead of addressing any of the alcoholism or any of those issues seriously, they just kept saying that my parents were just transphobic and that when they accepted me as their son, everything was going to be better. So I was like really pinning for that and trying really hard. So we went to this appointment with this lady, who I found out through suing her actually is not actually a doctor or a therapist or anything. She's not licensed as anything, but I was referred to her to write me this letter of recommendation. And I was written this letter very quickly that it was just a boilerplate letter copy and pasted from online and filled in with my information. It was actually already typed up on the computer when I walked in, and she just filled in my name after I basically told her that I hated myself and I was a boy. And I couldn't live the way I was living as a girl anymore, and I needed help. So then I took this letter from this lady I was referred to back to the pediatric endocrinologist who referred me there. And then she was able to start me on testosterone injections at 17. Um, I started on a really high dose. I said that I wanted to look different fast because I was very traumatized by the rape. And I honestly thought that if I was a man, that wouldn't happen again and I would be safe. And so I was started on a high dose as if I was the doctor in control of my medicine, the person who had gone to school or something when I wasn't. I was a 17-year-old girl. So I was on these injections for a very long time, like 7 or 8 years was my whole transition. But eventually the side effects caught up to me. I experienced a lot of side effects right away too. The first thing that happened, which is difficult to talk about, was bottom growth, they refer to it as. But I was told that this was like male genitalia appearing, and lied to and gaslit and told that the pain would go away and settle down and stuff like that. And I was told the same thing about the pain when it came from the atrophy in my uterus and my bladder. And then incontinence came, and muscle pain and aches came. And I discovered through having an ethical doctor now and trying to treat myself that I developed PCOS. I was getting scans and having cysts on my ovaries all the time, and they just kept telling me it was fine and gaslighting me. And giving me like muscle relaxers and stuff to deal with the pain. But so I just held on to the hope that I was going to turn into a man, only to continually be bombarded with side effect after side effect. But only a year after starting the testosterone, at 18, I had a double mastectomy. I what I thought I was getting was quote unquote top surgery. I thought that it was the magical surgery that turns your chest from a girl chest into a boy chest, but that is not what happened. I have a woman's chest that has been mutilated. I had pieces cut out, and my nipples were cut off and reshaped and reattached in the wrong spot. And I could not use them to breastfeed my son when he was born.
That's yeah, and I've had 5 children, and so when I know we're going to get to that, we're not there yet, but that part just broke me, hearing about all the difficulties, because you did eventually become pregnant. So again, we're going down the road a little bit here, but it's, some of us who have been kind of seeing this for a while and trying to warn people have spoken of it as mutilation. And there's been so many people denying that that's what it is. And what you just described is, you've used that word, I think, but there's no way to describe it otherwise. We're chopping up people's bodies. Another thing that strikes me, I just did a podcast that talked about someone that went through the judicial bypass to get an abortion behind her mother's back at 17. So there's other things that we're doing as a society that we're just not, we're not being mindful again of the child. I'm wondering, Prisha, if now you're kind of in misery and it sounds like a silent hell, was there any red flags yet that maybe these people weren't to be trusted? Or again, was that just like right now you're just trying to survive? And like you said, you were just hoping it was going to work out. Was there yet any, because I can tell you're really intelligent and a thoughtful person. So I'm wondering if at that moment there was kind of a breach of, I don't know, but you had to go forward. You were on this path, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any moments like that of wondering or regret until a very big aha moment that opened my eyes. But before then, I fully trusted my doctors and my peers in the trans community. I mean, all of us had something wrong for sure. I've never met anyone who's decided to transition while their life is going well. So something was clearly wrong, and we definitely needed help. And we were being told by these authority figures that it was going to get better, and also being love bombed and praised, and all of the glory in the media and all of that. I didn't see any cracks in the facade. I'd fully bought the lie, and I needed the hope really bad. I just had no
Mhm.
idea that it was false hope.
Right, right. Okay, so you're 18 now. You've gone through this major surgery. What happens next?
So I actually eventually, with the encouragement of my doctors, moved out with strangers online in Florida. I moved from the state of North Carolina to Florida. I was supposed to just visit, but I just never went on the flight back home because I was being affirmed there, and I thought that that was going to help me. And it also got me away from the situation in my home. So I thought that this was a good thing. But I ended up dating someone who also adopted a trans identity, and we just enabled and pushed each other further into delusion for multiple years while I lived in Florida, until eventually we broke up because she wanted to be polyamorous too, because this whole
Mm.
community is like this big sexual thing. And I started to see that. And I didn't want to be polyamorous. So we broke up, and I applied to random jobs all over the country. And I found one in Michigan. And that's where I met my fiance and stepdaughter, who were the ones who led to my detransition.
Wow. Well, and speaking of, and I don't want to get too personal here, but like was with all the things going on, I'm just I guess I'm wondering if sexual intimacy was even I don't know. It seems like it was being pushed so much, but was that even something desirable? I don't know. I'm
Yeah, I
just
mean, I testosterone changed my sexuality a lot and messed with it. It made me like frustrated and aroused a lot, and like I needed relief from the pain down there, but I didn't really want to have sex. I would like do things alone to relieve the pain, but it was highly distressing and upsetting. But I was on testosterone, so it was really difficult. But I, not to be too personal, but I did and continue to struggle with like having things put internally because of the atrophy and stuff like that. And the other effects of the testosterone have made me so sensitive that it's difficult to be touched. So it's like the
Mm.
whole thing is a mess.
Yeah. Not what anything that you could have anticipated. And yet here we have now a little bit of a turn of hope. You meet this young man, and tell us about that relationship and how it kind of started renewing you and giving you hope and and really waking you up. And was he a part of that, or was it just like finally finding safety and love that kind of helped you see it yourself?
So he's a really, really good man. He treated me as a friend at first. He didn't use me for anything, and he was never unkind. He showed me around the town that I was living in, which is where he grew up. And he's always lived here. And we would take walks by the river a lot and spend a really good time together. But it was his daughter, my now stepdaughter, who actually led me to detransition, because once he trusted me enough, he started letting me take care of her while he worked and have her in my life. And I remember it very
Mhm.
clearly. Not her mother is not a part of her life and just didn't want to participate in that. And very shortly after we started being together, and I took care of her and loved her and all of that, despite the fact that I was going by Charlie and I had facial hair and I was wearing male clothes, she started calling me mommy. And
Wow.
that's what broke the delusion for me.
Oh, wow, that's a powerful moment. There's something about children and
Yeah.
their innocence, and they can be a healing agent. I really believe because of that. And unfortunately, so much of that is tarnished as they go along, and a lot of people need healing. But there is that purity there, and that just that innocence, and they're so honest, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like that honesty plus love and it maybe like that motherhood was awakening in you a little bit too, like maybe for the first
Yeah.
time. Um, tell us a little bit about how old was she at the time?
She was 2.5. I mean, I remember the day she knocked on my door. Her dad let her up, and she knocked so softly and so tenderly, and he told her to knock louder, and I let them in. And I felt, a maternal instinct towards her right away, even if I wasn't ready to name it until she did. Yeah, I just felt that way towards her. And when she said it, I knew it was the right thing. And yeah, we're all living together now, and I love her very much.
Oh, that's so sweet. So tell me a bit more about that awakening. So it's like she punctured that. She kind of punctured the delusion, that cloud, and kind of put her little tender little fingers through it. And so now you're starting to grapple with all that. And I'm sure it was hard in a way because you just had bought into this whole movement and mentality. So what did you go through as you were sort of deprogramming yourself mentally?
Yeah, it was really difficult. I felt like I couldn't go back for a little while because I had gone so far and my body was so changed, and I don't look like I used to look. And that grieves me. I don't look like my mother or my sister, and I find that disturbing. And I didn't think there was any hope. And ultimately, it is irreversible. I haven't been able to go back or anything like that, but I started considering the cost of the lie and how hard it was not to be able to fully connect with people because I had to hide my childhood and then the fact that I was born female, and all of these things that were so painful and the side effects and having to inject myself with hormones every week. And I was having pain still from the surgery even though it had been a number of years. And I realized that, even through all of this work that my doctors and I had done to make me appear like a man, I really wasn't one. And this child could see that. And it made me happy to be called mommy. I realized that was something more fulfilling than being a woman who wore a costume that made her look like a man.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like she experienced you as a woman, no matter, like you said, no matter the costume, and as that childhood innocence. That's what she received. That's what she saw in you, and that's so beautiful. I'm wondering, like, you had to then go on some kind of search to, and also how was your boyfriend then? I'm not sure at what point you became official, but I'm assuming he was supportive and helpful too in helping you think through everything. But where did you kind of find the hope? Where was there a turn where you thought, okay, I can start to undo this? And then the other point, I know I'm making 2 points at once, that, and then also it's been said, and I've heard it before, and you also in a video, that one of the costs is that you become medically, you're dependent, like for life, more than you would have been at age 14 or 17 typically. That's another jarring part of it, because either in transition or detransitioning, you're dependent much more than you would have been right on the medical community. So anyway, I threw a lot there, but those two things I want to hear wherever you want to jump in, either to that point of the medical dependency or also this like emotional, mental transition and how you were helped out of that.
Yeah. So really it was my fiance and his daughter who pulled me through it. I took care of them and they took care of me. And I mean, they're the best part of my lives, and my baby now. I just love my family so much. Family's really important to me, and having one that is healthy and good and strong, is better than anything I was promised by transition. And I realized that. But yeah, I have, been taking weekly, had been taking weekly testosterone injections since 17 years old. And I had started on Depo-Provera a year before that at 16 to start the transition. And, frequent check-ins with the doctor and scans and blood work. And that didn't stop until I was about 24 years old. And come to find out, I mean, I had all kinds of problems when I withdrew from testosterone. That was very difficult and led to a lot of mental problems and physical problems. I didn't have any medical guidance in quitting the testosterone, and that was very difficult. But now that I do have a doctor, I get blood work done, and all of my hormones are imbalanced by what was done to me. I completely destroyed my entire endocrine system. My androgens are too high, and my estrogen and progesterone are too low, and my prolactin is really high too. And I have insulin resistance, and I have liver and kidney problems, and so on and so forth. It just goes on and on and on, all these problems that I have as a result of being put on anabolic steroids as a teenager. And I had, as I mentioned, the complications with my chest, and that's ongoing. My chest looks different, and I have pain in it. And with my prolactin being high, because all of my hormones are high, I get swelling and the nerve pain too. And obviously it's emotional as well. It's not just physical. I mean, I was perfectly healthy before any of this happened. There's no reason for this to be going on. But I have to deal with the impacts of what was done to me for the rest of my life.
Well, I'm glad you have the levity of having a beautiful family. That is, I know a lot of people listening are going to be so grateful as I am, because I know how life-giving and nurturing and difficult family life can be. But there is that the love at the center, that unconditional love and that nurturing and just the presence and that irreplaceability of people in our lives. And so I'm so grateful that you have that. Were you ever warned at all, or were you ever given any insight into any of the possible, many effects that you just listed? Was there any warning at all? Anything? We watch commercials on TV where there's a simple medication and it gives us a long, long list of all the effects, possible side effects. Were you ever given any information about that with these powerful drugs that you were getting?
I mean, the side effects were really glossed over, and all of these medical talks that were supposed to be informed consent were given to me through euphemisms. Like I said, for example, with my surgery, I literally thought I was getting quote unquote top surgery. I didn't understand that I was getting like a double mastectomy with, free nipple grafts. I didn't understand that or what any of those things meant. And I didn't know what atrophy was, vaginal atrophy, or what those things meant. It was mostly just advertised to me as the things you would want, like, oh, you'll get stronger, you might get more of an appetite. My endocrinologist actually, touted to have cured my eating disorder through the insulin resistance and appetite increase that came with the testosterone. Everything was just painted as a good thing, even when it was a bad thing. I was never informed, even as my scans showed that that my body was unhealthy and having issues.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. But I know that you're working hard now, Prisha, to resolve this, to reverse it, to help other people that are going through it, to just be a light and just to tell your story, which I know takes a lot of energy and isn't easy. This is probably a good time for that break. So why don't we pause here and we'll be back. And I want to hear about the journey you've been on, kind of tackling this in the legal system and other aspects of it. So we'll be right back, Prisha, with more Matters of Soul Importance after this break.
Local news affects your life. It gives you the confidence and clarity to make better decisions every day. You can support that with a digital subscription. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to take advantage of our introductory offer, just $6 for 6 months.
We're back with Matters of Soul Importance with Prisha Mosley. She is answering the question through question and answers here. Why couldn't I, a biological woman, be a man? Why couldn't she? She's laid it out now as to why that was impossible. I want to hear a little bit more about now. Before we go there, really quickly, Prisha, can you share a little bit about your pregnancy? Because you've mentioned that you have a baby, a little boy. Can you share a little bit about the complications? And then I want to hear about the court battles you've been tackling.
Yeah, sure. So I had a baby. He will be 2 in June, which just blows my mind. Everything they say about time flying is really true. But yeah, I actually got pregnant by surprise when I was put on birth control. Before that, I was infertile. I wasn't getting pregnant, through being with my fiance. And that was true for a couple years. but I started birth control, and I, much to my surprise, became pregnant. I immediately had to be put on progesterone to sustain the pregnancy. And it was a very difficult, high risk pregnancy. I saw high risk on all my paperwork every time I looked at it. And that was quite frightening. I developed gestational diabetes, probably due to the insulin resistance from the testosterone and the PCOS. I had a lot of pain. I had to be on Zofran all the time. I was throwing up all the time. I was actually throwing up all the way until he was out of me and I was holding him. So I was throwing up while I was giving birth. And I couldn't give birth naturally. I had to have a C-section due to the fact that my hips are not fully developed and apart because I was put on the testosterone as a teenager and I had an eating disorder. So my development wasn't great or fully there. And I was so young. So my hips aren't fully developed and I couldn't fit his head through them. I almost had an emergency at the delivery room because I was afraid to be operated on. And I kept telling them to go away and being scared. And then they told me that his head was getting low and stuck and that it was dangerous. So then I had to like go back really fast all of a sudden and save him. It was terrifying to be operated on again, and this time awake. And I have a lot of more nightmares about surgery now. But I was able to deliver my son. And yeah, I'm really grateful because he's a miracle. Things could have gone a lot worse with everything that was done to me. But the worst part was that I could not breastfeed him, and I had complications because my surgeon left pieces of breast tissue inside of me. So my milk actually came in, but because my nipples were grafted, I couldn't give it to him.
Oh, Prisha, I'm so sorry. I did get to experience that, and I'm grieved for you. But you're such a light, and your testimony is so important. Tell me just a little bit aside from the difficulty of what it was like to realize that you birthed a baby. And I mean, that was not going to be possible for you. What was that like when you were able to enjoy your little one?
I mean, it's still shocking to me. I love and enjoy him every day. I love spending time with him. He's so funny and so amazing to me. And I view him as my miracle. I'm so grateful and thankful. I mean, like I said, it still feels unbelievable to me sometimes that he's even here. I had no expectation or even hope of this, and he's here now.
Absolutely. It's so beautiful. And again, I talked earlier about children being a healing balm, and I can imagine, and also the body too, even though you're going through so much, your body healed in that way, despite all the obstacles and the odds, your body produced a child that wasn't in existence before, which is just amazing. It truly is a miracle. You have decided to fight this once that awakening happened. You're doing it with help. Share a little bit about that journey of taking this on. Like I said earlier, you are so well spoken, and you have the details all fleshed out so well, and really in a horrifying way. I mean, we all need to be awoken to this. Tell us a little bit about how you went down the journey of deciding to do something about it, because you could just lead a quiet life, a peaceful life, but you've chosen to be out there in the spotlight, and I'm sure it's not always easy. So what propelled that decision?
Yeah, I've been speaking out for a couple of years now, and I've testified in, I think, more than 25 states, and it's now illegal for children to transition in 27 states. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have been able to speak to members of the House and the Senate in so many different places and be heard and ultimately help change the laws in many states, including the state where I was transitioned, North Carolina. I decided to do it, though, because what happened to me was so bad that I didn't want it to happen to anyone else, except I knew that it was, and it is. So I don't want those people to be alone, and I don't want doctors to be able to continue to get away with it. It has come at great sacrifice of my privacy and oftentimes even my safety. But although it's scary, I find that it's much more scary to just watch this whole thing unfold and see more of my peers and my generation be harmed the way I was harmed without knowing what I know now.
Yeah, there was a recent court case in last month, and I haven't followed through on that. I saw that it was coming. How is that turning out? I know you were hopeful that some of the earlier, stops to being able to help young people. Now you had a chance to reverse that and move forward with it. How is that coming?
Yeah, I've heard about other detransitioner cases too. I have my own lawsuit now, and I'm doing my best to fight for justice. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get justice for myself and for my children who have also been harmed and wronged by what happened to me. But I'm also hoping that um, winning would lead to doctors and insurance companies not wanting to cover and provide these services anymore, especially at least for people who are as young as I was or younger. So that's my hope with having a legal battle.
With this on your head and heart, and every day you live it out, I'm sure there's some anger in there. How do you deal with that? The anger towards the quote unquote medical community that led you on this path and so deeply into it. Is that difficult to deal with, or do you have a way of managing those sort of thoughts?
I deal with a lot of grief and pain, and I will never look at or trust doctors the way I used to think they could save me. Um, I don't think I'll ever rely on a human that way again. Um, but the grief and pain are very big, but I try to focus on the good things in my life that are also very big, like my children. I'm very grateful for them. So I just try to redirect and not focus on it because the emotions are so big and so painful. And ultimately, I'm doing everything I can do as far as trying to change the laws and fight for justice. So I just can't safely emotionally be in a place where I'm thinking about it a lot, but it's
Right.
hard.
What would you say to maybe some parents out there, and some of the young people that have transitioned and now feel stuck? Both, because I think the parents in some ways, in some cases, are kind of victims too, because they also were led down a path thinking, that if they didn't do this, their child was going to commit suicide. And in fact, we know that the suicide rates and inclinations are just as high after transition. But what sort of message do you have out there for those who have experienced this and experienced the devastation of an attempt at transition and the after effects?
The truth is that the whole idea and premise of transition is a scam because no one can actually change sex, and making cosmetic alterations to conceal your appearance and emulate the opposite sex cures nothing, and medicine isn't that great at it yet anyway. People you see online posting pictures and stuff where they look like they pass always have filters or are highly edited or posed. And when you put them next to someone of the sex they're emulating, there's usually like a really big height difference or difference in the hands. And I mean, there's no actual way to become the opposite sex. And living your entire life needing the public to lie to you so that you can feel safe is basically just giving up. There's no way to live like that. And for people who have come to realize this on their own, who have gone through medical interventions that are irreversible and now feel stuck, all I can say is that you aren't alone. It does get better the longer you go out of the longer you're detransitioned and the longer you're off the hormones. And when you stop pursuing more surgeries, it gets better. But the truth is, you have to learn radical acceptance and gain the ability to soothe yourself and calm your own emotions down and not have to rely on the public to do that for you because you can't control other people, but you can control yourself.
Absolutely. That's a hard one journey, but it's worth it, and you've shown that you can do it. I one more question about people like me who've confronted this situation in public. So recently, it wasn't that long ago, I'm a pro-life advocate, so I pray at abortion facilities and try to give hope to women that are abortion vulnerable. We had an event that we did a walk and prayed at the local abortion facility, and the escorts had all sorts of things waiting for us. They were in clown suits, and there was drawings that were offensive intentionally. But one of the most stark things that we experienced was three of them pulled off their shirts and showed us their scars from their top surgery. What do we do as everyday people that are like trying to just be truthful and honest, and we're kind of getting attacked for that? Is there any sort of wisdom you have for like the everyday person that's just kind of been surrounded by this?
I would try to appeal to a different morality, something you can agree on, because clearly you disagree about the abortion thing. But what about the idea that telling women that their breasts being attached to their body is causing them suffering and then cutting them off? What if that's misogyny? Because we did that with hysterectomies already. We told women that their uteruses were making them sad, and then we cut them out. And then now we're doing the same thing with women's breasts, followed by their uterus. If they just say that they're men and their body parts are making them sad, I would try to appeal in a different way, because there's so many avenues and ways in which this trans ideology is wrong. In many ways, it's pedophilic because you're altering the bodies and future sex lives of children. It's misogynistic because you're taking body parts and spaces and sports away from women, so on and so. It's sexist because you're just emulating the stereotypes of the opposite sex rather than realizing that your sex is, chromosomal, and according to your gay mates. It's anti-evolution because children and babies evolved to be able to tell what sex we are and be able to tell who's a man and who's a woman, and even an infant can do it. It's anti-biology because it worsens your health, and humans are mammals and mammals aren't able to change sex, so on and so forth. There's every single reason, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a scientist, whether you love children, there's every reason to not support this ideology.
Well, I wish I could just take this recording and hand it to them. And, of course, our position is sadness and knowing that there's been a lie there, and just, we don't judge in that way. At least I try not to, but it is kind of hard to receive sometimes. So, but
Yeah.
all those things that you just laid out are the truth, and so well put and so strongly felt because you've experienced it. At the end of every episode, I always circle back to the question, even though it's been answered. I'm just going to ask it one more time. Why couldn't I or you, a biological woman, be a man? Prisha.
Because like I said, humans are mammals and mammals aren't able to change sex. Trans activists and doctors will often bring up clownfish and how clownfish are able to change sex, but they're also able to breathe underwater, which humans can't do. It doesn't make sense. It's against biology. All you can do is become a gross emulation of what you think of as the opposite sex, or what your doctor thinks of as a man or a woman, and that's it.
Prisha, you are a powerful voice for this, and I'm so grateful that those stories are getting out. I know there's others like you. We just thank you. Those of us who have seen it and have wanted to voice it, but we don't have the experience like you have gone through. And I'm so sorry that you have gone through all that. So on behalf of the culture and society, I'm sorry that you were let down as a child. And I'm just so happy, and I know others are as well, like I said, that you have found some resolve and some hope. And we're just behind you as you continue this fight in the court. So thank you again, Prisha, for being with us today. Go and hug your family. Have a wonderful day. Why couldn't I, a biological woman, be a man? We asked this of Prisha Mosley, and I think she made the case pretty clear. It's impossible and a lie to believe that we can change our sex. When it comes to cultural issues of our day, the most powerful testimonies come from those who have lived what the culture purports to be a right, a good, but is just the opposite. One can wail all day long about sexual rights and bodily autonomy, but if that so-called right only leads to the destruction of oneself or another, we need to review what we've come to constitute as a culture, just what is good and right. We didn't get into Prisha's religious background, but in an interview with the Christian Tribune, when asked about her faith, she said, "I actually see trans ideology as sort of like a tantrum against Christianity," adding, "I'd like to maybe go to a church in the future, but I'm still doing the personal relationship thing with God." For our purposes here, however, I just wanted to hear more about her journey, including the horrors of what she's been through and how she's fighting for true justice for herself, her family, and others who've been led down an irreversible path of bodily mutilation, all because we could, without asking if we should. These are ethical issues at heart. This episode also ties in with my May 15th conversation about a post-abortive woman who also was used, in a sense, like Prisha, to advance an agenda. Both were minors when they went down a road of decisions that they cannot take back. Thankfully, our good God can make us new again, and he seems to be working in the lives of both these brave souls who are doing what they can to give voice to the injustices that have been indelibly harmed their lives, and those others still are suffering, seeking relief. As I say often, the truth shall set you free, and it's time we became more honest about what happens in the dark. I'm grateful for Prisha's taking the time to bring light to this challenging topic. Please keep her in your prayers with me that her court battles are won and her life completely restored. Well, in a couple of weeks, getting back to the topic of abortion and just ahead of the anniversary of the Dobbs decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, we'll ask a leading voice in such matters, did the fall of Roe help or hurt the pro-life cause? Until then, don't lose sight of the light.